Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and with me, as usual, my brother, my co-host, Paul Jobson. Paul, how you doing, man?
Phil, doing really well. I'm wearing a Baylor jacket today,
Nice, nice.
fresh off an alumni weekend that was
Yeah,
unbelievable.
awesome.
You never know how those are going to go. Baylor hasn't done one in a while, not since we've left, and so some former players got with Michelle and put something together really special. Had just tons and tons of players there, all their children running around, which is crazy. They have definitely
Yeah.
gone forth and multiplied,
Mm-hmm.
and it was
Nice.
amazing to see. But just an awesome weekend, just 2 or 3 days of just getting to catch up with former players. I mean, forget over 14 years how many players come through the ranks. So we had even players that played for Randy back in the
Wow.
1990s were
Wow.
there. So amazing event. Baylor did a great job putting that together and making everybody feel welcome and special. So anyway, just still kind of on a high from that. But yeah, so that's our highlight of the week was that event. So it was a lot of fun. But how about you? What's been going on in the dark world?
Oh, that is so cool. Are you like an honorary alumni then? Because how do you get in the door?
I I
That's
I
what I'm
wanted
wondering.
I wanted an honorary degree, that would have been
Yeah.
nice, but,
Right.
I
Right.
just snuck in, actually. What was
Okay.
great
Okay.
was
Good.
the lady who was the security guard was
Yeah.
always the security guard when I was there, so
Yeah.
she was happy to
Nice.
see me, hug
Okay.
me, and let me come in. Other than that, I
Nice.
probably wouldn't have been able to get in.
Okay, good, good. I
Yeah,
just making sure. Just making
yeah.
sure everything's good. You're still welcome at Baylor, so that's good. They didn't have to tackle you or anything, which is nice.
I think they still like me there. I don't think there's
Okay,
been anything. Yeah.
good, good. Awesome. No, yeah, I saw some pictures of that. I was stoked that you were able to do that. That's so cool. I mean, that's what makes it all just you look back and go, man, this is so many great stories. And I know you're exactly where you're supposed to be today, and you
Yeah.
were exactly where you were supposed to be then. And to be able to see the what God has done in and through all those stories, that's it's so cool. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Um, doing well. We had our banquet for our team. Just as I've said before on this show, the best year I've ever had coaching. And it was so funny at our banquet.
Mm.
Like we had a freshman girl when we announced her to come up to get her little certificate. She did a little dance on the way up. It was just so funny. And I was like, "Hey, do you want to say something since you're just doing a show here?" So she literally grabs the mic and shares about her season, and it was so moving because she started crying and saying how this was, her favorite year playing soccer, and, the girls are like family to her, and she then gonna miss the scene. It was basically the stuff that I had said about the team. She said
Mhm.
it total impromptu, and it was a great way to finish the season, and again, kinda going back to what you were just talking about, like, what it's all about, right? Like, yeah, we had a great year on the field. We great, CIF finals, all that stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like they have lifetime friends. And, we had only 2 girls miss the banquet, which is usually we have about half
Right.
miss, but they did not wanna miss. And the girls that didn't come this was crazy. The girls who couldn't make it, they sent their parents. Their parents showed up to this banquet without them there, and it was so cool. Like it was a really cool thing. The other thing,
Awesome.
we'll talk about this I wanna just kinda prime it here. Started watching that show Adolescence. I don't know if you've seen that on
Mm.
Netflix, but
No,
it's fascinating. It's like, I mean, first of all, just the way they made it was incredible. Every episode is just one take and one camera shot that is moving through wherever. But it's also about kids and, social media use and all this different stuff that does apply to, sports and all this these other things. But anyway, it's been interesting. I've been watching that with my family. And I watched Pulisic with my son. I don't think I've mentioned that on this yet, but
mm,
that is a great documentary about Christian Pulisic, and it's on Paramount Plus. Fantastic to watch with kids. It's very appropriate. He's a believer, which I didn't realize. And it's just a really good show about the realities of the game and, the trainings and what it really takes mentally, physically, emotionally, to really make it. So anyway, it's been good. It's been good. A lot of different stuff with family, but as we were saying before we started recording, I had a daughter in Cambodia. My other daughter, obviously, in Wisconsin. My sons talking about going out to Wisconsin this summer. So I don't even know where my kids are anymore, and that's what's awesome is they're doing incredible things, and I love miss them of course, but it's so great to see them kind of flying and doing their thing. So anyway, we have a
So cool.
great episode today. I can't wait to get to this conversation. Um, Paul, a couple weeks ago, you're like, hey, I got this guy. Gonna have a great conversation with him. So I looked him up, thought, all right, well, let's give it a shot, see what happens. And so now we got Sean Miller with us with Upper90HQ, which I'm excited to learn more about. But Sean, how you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate the opportunity, and I'm getting to know you guys and getting to tell our little story.
Yeah, awesome. Well, either you've listened to this show or you just you just hit a great segue. But we do love hearing just your story. Just briefly share your story, how you developed your passion for soccer, for coaching, entrepreneurship, leadership, all the stuff that you've done. And really just how you ended up starting Upper 90 HQ and where you're at today.
Sure, I appreciate it. Started the business in 2011, and was kind of on a whim. Um, I was coaching at the time, in Dallas in the club scene. And as you all know, Dallas is just a volatile soccer world. The landscapes there is just one like no other, I would say, in the country. And another coach called me and said, hey, I have a friend of mine that owns a sports videography business down in Houston. She needs some help filming an event in Dallas. And I'm like, sure, I'll do it. Um, I meet her. She hands me this, 23-foot tripod that weighs a gazillion pounds, shows me a 10-minute walkthrough. And she said, all right, you're going to go to these 5 fields and you're going to film these games. Okay. So I go and film them. And he's like, all right, just mail me the SD cards. So no problem. Do that. And I said, can I keep the unit? She's like, yeah, no worries. I'll get it back in January. So I call her one day and say, hey, can I film my daughter's indoor games to make me a better videographer? Because it's much faster paced. He's like, sure. So daughter played at Solar at the time. Pretty good team, 2003 team. And they had an older team. The head coach had an older team at 2000s. So I started filming. And then people was like, hey, can I get a copy? So I started selling DVDs. The good old DVDs.
Yeah, what are those? I forgot.
Yeah, right. I just aged myself. Then, it just blossomed. Other teams would ask us or ask me to film. I was the one guy with one pole, just, schlepping it around the fields. I ended up stopped coaching and started the Upper 90 Sports Media. We went to flash drives. Then we went to the cloud. Fast forward it to, my daughters, played pretty high level, both of them. My son played at different clubs. He ended up playing at Dallas Baptist D2. Older daughter played at Texas. Younger daughter now is in Birmingham, Alabama at Stanford University. So they all have had, great opportunities through the game. But through the video company, it was an opportunity for me to really give back to the community in a different way, because in 2011, video was not really, there was not a lot of opportunities for games to be videoed. A lot of people were just using it for memories. Well, fast forward to COVID, and all of a sudden the recruiting process, video is essential. Coaches couldn't go watch games, so to speak. So we went through that transition period. COVID really gave us a hockey stick. We moved into the autonomous camera systems where you can start and stop them with your phone. So I literally took instead of having one guy, one pole, one person could run 5 fields, 6 fields, 10 fields. So now we're at the scalability of, we can film hundreds of games over the weekend. We then partnered with the camera company in Denmark. So now we do MLS Next, Girls Academy, the DPL, USL, US Youth Soccer. Then I pretty much, soccer's our bread and butter, but I realized that you can't put all your eggs in one basket. So we had to diversify. And so started doing lacrosse. Now we partner with NBC Sports. We're doing the Next Pro Puma basketball circuit. So this little entity that was just one guy, one pole in 2011 has really blossomed into one of the larger video companies in the country. Um, we've diversified. We use VO cameras. We use Pixelots. We use Speedio. Paul probably knows Speedio maybe from having an install at Baylor, which is fixed mount, and majority of the NCAA schools utilize it. Um, and then we've got some other things that we're working on for the future for 25 and 26. But really, soccer gave me the opportunity, to build a company on something that I loved very much. Like soccer is a passion of mine. I enjoyed it. I met my wife playing through the game. Have three great kids, through that relationship, and all of them have got to experience soccer at the college level, and really has just, has been a foundation of our family, from the beginning.
And so let's go back to your beginnings in soccer.
Sure.
So just tell that story of just kind of your soccer journey. And, obviously it involves some businesses and things like that too, but just, how did you develop your personal passion for the game itself?
That's kind of a catch-22 question. I grew up in Dallas. I grew up in the northwest side of Dallas, um, you know, yeah, Forest Lane and Josie Lane area. Um, and I actually started playing soccer at the rec center because that's where I would hang out in the summers and after school. And soccer was one of the predominant sports that was played by some of the guys or the boys in the neighborhood. They played for Comets, Longhorns, and these are some of the storied clubs in Dallas in the late '80s, early '90s. I graduated high school in '91, and so a lot of these guys were on some really, really good teams. Now, this is back in the age of there was one team or one club in that age group. I
Hmm.
remember in the '80s, Pele came to Dallas Cup, drove around in a convertible Mustang at Lake Highland Stadium. I had a friend of mine in high school was Bolivian, so Taiwichi came. This is going way back. They won it 2 or 3 years in a row. Uh, Guy scored Marco Echeverri, who played for DC United, played on that team. These are just David Beckham came and played, back in these days. And I really, you know, gained my passion for the game through my friends because at that time, a single mom, she couldn't afford for me to play club. I actually tried out for 73 Storm, which actually became one of the first Texans team. But when my mom found out how much it was, I wasn't able to play. So a little bit about part of what I've given to the game is if there's a team, I never wanted economics to play a part in someone getting video. So if a team couldn't afford like our price, okay, well, what can you afford? Or I would always try to do something for a club or a team or a family because I knew where my roots came from and what I wasn't able to do because of economically being challenged growing up. So I've always tried to, early on when I ran the business, not let that be indicative of who we were going to be because of my passion for the game, and I wanted to give back. Um, so it really was indicative of the sport that was played in my neighborhood and my friends that I had, and it's really given me a lot of lifelong friends and opportunities that I never really fathomed.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, it's such a we'll get into that later on as far as the differences in the game and in the
Sure.
just how it's totally different today. I mean, I'm a '92 grad from high school, and our friend Paul down there is a little bit younger, but not too
You guys
much
are old
younger.
guys.
We are the
Old
old
guys.
men. Well, I mean,
I'm
Sean,
not
you're
gonna even tell
super
you.
old,
I'm not even
but
gonna tell you when I
I'm
graduated from high school.
I'm pretty
Yeah, you
old,
don't want me to
but
take my hat off. I'm gray.
yeah,
Let's not go there.
yeah. You're only a year older, but that's
Yeah,
probably like math. It's
yeah,
exponential now, I think. No,
yeah.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, so that's there's so much there that we could mine. But one of the things I want to just kind of hear is and how that all that shaped you. I know my kids will probably tell a similar story someday. Yeah, we wanted to play on X team, but my dad was in ministry and we just couldn't afford it. And that's the reality of a lot of people's stories, though, right? Like that shapes, where you're able to play. Do you have the money? Do you have is your family willing to move to some other location so the kid can play soccer? Those are all things
Mhm.
that go into the equation. But with all that and how your, your childhood, how your different stuff has shaped you, like what is your personal why and life purpose, and how are you living that out?
You know, it's funny that you asked that because if you'd asked me that probably 2 to 5 years ago, my why probably would be different. I think over the past couple of years, uh, just through my wife and her faith journey began before mine. Like I've always had a background and believed in God and Jesus and had faith, right? But not actively participating and getting in the Word or attending church. We attend church, but you can attend church and not be participating, right? So I feel like over the past couple of years, even probably around COVID, I was in a Bible study called Freedom, where you just peel back the onion. I don't know if you ever heard about Freedom, but it's a 13-week program. They usually do it guys and girls. It's separate, and then at the end of 13 weeks, there's a Freedom Conference. Everybody comes in. There's deliverance. There's just celebration of all of these revelations that have happened over these 13 weeks. And so my wife now leads Freedom. She's been through it 3 times. I've been through it. And then, here probably in the last year, she went through, 2 years ago, she went through ministry school. So by osmosis and me being around such a powerful, spiritual, faithful woman, I've now also, have just embraced that. And it's actually changed our family. It's changed the way that I look at things and the why. And I think the why now is to bring souls to Christ in whatever way that we possibly can. I wouldn't have told you that 5 years ago. I wouldn't have told you that 2 years ago. So my why is way different than I think now than it is. And, if it's tithing or if it's, helping a family in need or just helping a brother that just needs to talk about something, and being it faith-based or just having fellowship with other men or families. Like there's a ministry my wife is involved in called Sealed Ministries. It's just getting off the ground, but we do family fellowship every other week. And then once a week we have a campfire meeting, and bring in one of our brothers in Christ from Atlanta, and he comes in and he delivers a message. And it's just powerful when you really have that as a foundation in your family and in your business. It changes your outlook. So my why has definitely changed in the past few years.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think most people would say, those of us that are a little older, our why does change, right? As we learn more and grow, and especially through our faith, as our faith, intertwines more in our life. I think all three of us, as we were talking kind of before the show started, not only did we marry soccer people, but faith is a big part of our lives and our wives' lives. And I know, as it talks about being equally yoked, right? It is important, especially for the growth of your family and being in line with how you want to serve your community, not just serve your family, but serve your community. So I love hearing that. And I'm sure that as we dive into more of what we're going to talk through today, we'll see a lot of that intertwine with your story, right? Of, how your why kind of aligns in that. And I'd love to dive a little bit deeper. We talked a little bit about your business and how that started. And it's cool. I love entrepreneurship, and I love especially businesses that start just out of, saying yes to something. Oh yeah, sure. I'll carry that 5,000 pound. And I'm sure it's probably not 5,000 pounds, but every time you tell the story, it gets heavier, right? It gets heavier, right? And I think I saw you
Sure.
2 years ago, and you had other people carrying the poles for you. So
Oh,
that's a true leader right there,
he's
right?
arrived.
I'm kidding. This guy's the first one at an event and the last one to leave. Okay. I just tell you that from experience. Great leader. But let's talk a little bit more about, your soccer journey, how it's, merged in kind of obviously with your faith journey, and how that's intertwined in your business, and how that even your soccer career has kind of shaped, and maybe some of the lessons you've learned from soccer that have shaped your family and maybe let's specifically talk about your business career and how that's kind of shaped itself together, and how you lead.
Soccer's given me a lot. Soccer can be super painful. It can be super joyful. You can, you make friends. You can lead on the field. You can lead off the field. Um, you can also, by your actions, lead in a negative way. Saying something, bad tackle, um, playing rough, co-ed. I mean, you know, it can, it gives you so much, right? And, for me, I think a lot of that was I wanted my kids to share in all those things because you have to deal with all different types of people when you're on the field, right? There's 11 people and there's different coaches and whatnot. And so taking that from the game and putting that into the business side allows me, I also spent 10 and a half years at Hilton. I was in the corporate side for 10 and a half years. And I was a trainer and I traveled a lot. And, you have to deal with all walks of life in business too, right? You could have a great manager. You could not have a not so great manager, but you've got to learn how to handle different people at different levels. And, I think soccer, handling different coaches, there's a screamer, there's a yeller. We had some, fun dialogue before about some people that we know. And then we have the quiet ones, the silent ones, right? And then you've got good cop, bad cop scenarios, from a coaching perspective. So, being able to, one, understand that, but I think some of my faith has allowed me to discern that. Back then I had no idea I was just like, I don't know if I like that guy or that person, because of the communication style or whatever it may be. But now as we talked about faith and stuff and being able to discern that, and see through some of that anger and that boisterous and that vocal and really is, uh, so, um, and then being the leader that I am today, right? I I've always tried to tell myself, I don't want to ever ask anybody on my team or my staff to do anything that I wouldn't do. Now that's dangerous. Because like you said, I'm the first one there. I'm the last one to leave. And it's like, at the end of the day, I'm like, hey, I'll see you dark and early. Everyone that says, I'll see you, bright and early. I'm like, it's going to be dark when I get there.
Mm.
Like, so there's not such thing as showing up, when the sun's rising. I'm already there. But I do pride myself on, being an example. And I went through a time and look, life is not all peaches and cream. I went through a time where I drank a lot and, because I was on the road and I felt like that was something that I tried to utilize for me to, oh, that's my relaxation. That was my vice. And I was like, and actually through freedom and actually another Bible study after that, part of that was, um, you know, you have to give up certain things, but then there was also a standard. During that standard was like there's no alcohol and there's some other requirements, right? Then you had to choose one other thing that you wanted on your own to give up. And I gave up soda, And as a guy that like goes to work when it's dark and goes home when it's dark, like you need caffeine. It's what you know. So, but that was a realization for me that I didn't need any of those things. And those were all just set on me that, so going back to the leadership, leading by example. So I would go to dinner with my staff and we would all have a beer or whatever it was. Now I'm the guy that's, if they want to have one, that's fine, but I'm leading by example. Now that's made me lighter. It's made me, there's no more brain fog. It's made me a better leader in so many different aspects that I didn't know was capable because that was just a way of life for me. And so, as you kind of look at what is the game giving you? How does it give you the leadership skills? You take that into your family, but you also take that into your workplace and entrepreneurship. And, there's some times where I wasn't a very good example for my staff, but I've flipped that, and now, being, having a much stronger faith-based, it's so much easier to put all of those recipes and to those ingredients to have a new recipe for success and leadership. So I'm excited about where we're headed and where we've been. We're continuing to grow, and that's awesome. And it's just, you've got to stay ahead of, from a futuristic part, you got to stay ahead of the competition. But I think we do that through faith. We do that through our leadership, and we do that through our relationships.
Yeah. I love that. First of all, I appreciate your vulnerability on all of that. It's just amazing. I love the story, and I love it's probably going to relate to a lot of different people. And when I think about coaching and leading, as well as just being and what it means to be an athlete and the sacrifices you have to have as an athlete as you're developing and growing. I mean, you've had kids that play at a high level, you're around high level athletes. There's a lot of sacrifice involved. And I think those of us that worked with young players who talk about sacrifice, what does that look like? And I think that does set us up sometimes well as adults. We can now look back and go, okay, yeah, as an adult too, there's things that I have to sacrifice to be able to do things with excellence, right? And especially when, as an athlete or a entrepreneur or a businessman, if we're Christians and we believe that we are working for someone greater than all of us, there's a great standard there, and we all fall short, right? None of us are perfect or even doing probably a great job all the time. I know I'm not, but those sacrifices are so important to lead. And the vulnerability, one thing I've loved about the show, we have a lot of people like yourself that are vulnerable in those moments to say, hey, yeah, it's not peaches and cream. I've messed up. This is where things are, but we can all grow from that and get better, right? And being that example in the up and the down is a great leader, right? That vulnerability. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah,
No,
that's
just to say, like, I think that's where we all learn the most. If you can be real, vulnerable, honest, I think that's what's, we can get on these types of podcasts and interviews and whatnot, and just, oh, it's wonderful. The world is great. I mean, it's not. In reality, it's not. And it takes a village. It really does. And if just a conversation with three guys on a podcast hits home with one person, you know what? We've done something positive in the world today. And, I'm all about, and my mindset has changed a bit. Like I told you earlier on, is, if I can tell my story, my real story, maybe I can make an impact somewhere, some way, somehow to someone. And that's the beautiful part about, doing something like this.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it was maybe our last episode we did where they were talking about taking risks, right? Like you take risks stepping on the field every time you step on the field. And that's what being vulnerable is. It's taking a risk. And when you take a risk, that's when things can happen in relationship too. And that's when the healing happens too. You need to take that risk to be able to have that reward at the other side of it. And the reward,
Mhm.
that's not why you do it necessarily sometimes, but that's the way the relationship is. When you're vulnerable with someone, you're taking a risk that they could use that information in a way that could hurt you potentially. But it also could be something that could bring healing and could bring tremendous, deeper relationships. And I've seen that in different teams that I've been on, different teams that I've coached. The more the
Mm.
teams are able to go be vulnerable with each other and to actually take those risks with each other, the more that team grows and the more that team plays together and wants to run through a brick wall for each other. So I've loved seeing that. So I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have something you were gonna say?
Well, I was going to say, like, my daughters have played on a couple different teams, and they played on some powerhouse teams, and then they played on some blue collar teams. The memories with the blue collar teams that didn't have as much talent as the powerhouse team are a little bit different than, playing on a high profile team. The, the, um, the opportunities and the successes together were different than the successes that were with the team that had all the athletes. I just remember my daughter played for the Dallas Texans for a couple years. She played a lot solar and then went to Dallas Texans, and we made the final four of the development academy U15, the Texans. And that was a team that was, not by far had all the best athletes, but they played as a team. And, we ended up didn't get the job done. Went to the final four and we lost in the third place game. But to make it there was such an achievement based on who we were all there with. We were there with the FC Dallases and the Serfs and the beach and, and the legends, I mean, it was, these are some very storied teams, but the success of that team was not because it was one individual person. It was a collective group effort. So it's just interesting to see. And, um, but she learned a lot from being on that team, because you don't always have to be the best, if you
Yeah.
will. So
Absolutely. Yeah, we were talking about our team banquet earlier. We had 8 of the, really, 11 starters, right? 8 girls on our team received MVP votes on our team this year, which was like just a testament to this team, to your point, right? Like, you can have these teams where there's the superstar and everyone knows they're the superstar, they take over games. Or you have teams where everyone plays their role and everyone sees how they fit together. And if they aren't playing, if one's not playing well, the whole thing is not doing well,
yeah.
And when they're clicking, it's beautiful, right? And so to see that, for them to be able to see that even at these younger ages is such a great thing, because it does translate into business. It does translate. You're in teams. Everything, in life, you're in these different teams. And so I love being able to teach that. Well, let's move on. And what was a defining moment in your athletic career, your soccer career? Any, if you played other sports, presumably you played football at some point if you grew up in Texas. I don't know.
No,
Maybe not, but I don't know.
not me. I was the pipsqueak in high school. I
Oh,
was,
okay. All right.
I
All right.
was,
So
I was not the size of any of those monstrosities of football players.
that's the other side of it. I grew up in Southern California. Same thing. I played 2 years and was like, I'm done. Guys that I did hitting drills with went to USC and Arizona State respectively, and it hurt. And I'm like, forget that. I'm sticking to soccer.
Except
But
Phil, unlike me and you, Sean actually grew and actually is an average sized male, as opposed
yes,
to me and you. Like, he may have been a
that's true.
pipsqueak in high school, but he's not a pipsqueak anymore.
Yeah.
So just qualifying that we are on a video call. I look like I'm 7 feet tall here, so I want to make
You
sure.
are not,
Yeah,
nor
I'm
am
not.
I.
No,
I have
no.
no
That's
idea
hilarious.
with
Sean's bringing
Sean,
up
but
the average height of this call.
Yeah.
Okay, just throw that.
yes. Well,
For
good.
sure.
I'm glad you could do that for us, Sean. But what was a defining moment in your athletic career, and why was it so impactful? And how are you using that today in your leadership and business and different areas?
I played club ball at Stephen F. Austin. And, this is in the, 91, 92, 93 era. So back in the day, it was, you had to go to Midwestern or SMU if you wanted to play big ball, really in Texas. Texas had a team. Baylor had a team. A&M had a team. And I think one of the defining moments for me was losing to Baylor and the opportunity to go to nationals. This is club soccer in college. And while it was very disappointing, it was just an opportunity to accept defeat, and some of those defining moments in other people's are like winning a championship or whatever it may be. I think this one was just learning that, the game is not everything, but it can teach you so much. And I think maybe today in this age, a lot of people just are defined by the game and not the game should never define you. You should be able to define yourself. And that was kind of a defining moment for me that, I didn't let the game define who I was. So overcoming adversity, losing in that game. And that was at a young age, I was 18, 19 years old, and you fast forward that to, maybe playing in my 20s or in my 30s. I just think injuries, I've had C6, C7 fused in my neck, and, having that injury in your late 20s and not knowing and having that surgery and not knowing and the craziest thing about having that surgery for me is I was only worried about asking the doctor, will I be able to play again? Not if I could talk, not if I could put my clothes on, not, have kids, but if I could play the game. And so I was so caught up in loving the game so much that I just wanted to play it as much as possible while also having a career. So I think that was kind of a defining moment. I look back on that and I'm like, man, priorities were a little messed up. I should have been worried about some other things. And so I think there's a couple, that one being the loss in college, and it was a defining moment. But then that game just overtaking, I mean, I was playing at Inwood, I was playing men's, I was playing co-ed, playing 2, 3 nights a week. I mean, games a day at Inwood. I was a goalkeeper, so everybody needed a goalkeeper. Um, so just, there was a couple defining moments that really just changed my outlook on priorities. And then, I think the big one is when you have kids, that definitely priorities change a little bit, or a lot. I say a little bit, but they're life-changing moments. So um, those are probably two of the ones from the game that really kind of affected me.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned most people. I will say, I think I can remember one. Actually, one. Maybe there might have been one or two, maybe three, that were positive stories that were the defining moments for people in their game, which is why, when the things don't go well, that's where I, talk to the girls I coach and my kids themselves and be like, these are the things that will impact you deeply in life, that will teach you lessons that you can use if you so choose to learn those lessons, right? And so
Sure.
anyway, so Paul, what do you think?
Yeah. No, I agree. I do. I think that's been one of the bigger surprising things within the conversations that we have, is that those defining moments really are not what you think they're going to be, right? But we do know as adults that those are the opportunities to learn the most, right? I definitely have learned more from my challenges than I have from the successes that I've had throughout my career. And I think even coming off this weekend with our alumni, some of the best conversations we have were girls that had been through some really hard stuff, that realized, like, hey, you told us this was difficult, but it wasn't going to be the most difficult thing we'd ever go through. Now I'm married and I have children, and like, that's way harder than running a fitness test or losing to, somebody, that I shouldn't have lost to, whatever. So as coaches, just kind of reeling it back to coaches and leadership, like helping people, manage what those what they think might be life defining moments are, and realizing, that there's more to come, right? And how do we take something from each of these opportunities that we have to learn and to grow? So I very much align with that. And Sean,
Paul, you even
yeah.
you even said that we should try to lose in a
Yeah.
couple episodes ago, I think is what I
Yeah,
remember you saying.
I did.
Yeah.
It was a
Yes.
tactic in my staff that I would say, hey,
Yes.
listen, guys, we probably should lose one.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
now I will say I do have some boys who think that they are God's gift to whatever they do,
Uh-huh.
because they win a lot. And I have
Yeah.
said multiple times, we need to find some teams that will kick their butt because they need to
Darn right.
lose. They need to
Absolutely.
lose. There's some humbling to that, for sure. But just
Yep.
for set the record straight, at Baylor, at Northern Illinois University, I've never said, hey, girls, let's get out there and blow this one. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so just to be clear.
Yes.
So
But when you play that team that's just better, it
yeah,
gives you something to say, I need to, like, we haven't arrived, right?
yeah,
Like, and there's something. Anyway, so
yeah. That's a whole nother show, right? Where we talk about, like, how, what can we
absolutely.
learn from our losses, and how do we get better? And we haven't
Yeah.
arrived. And that's usually the conversation you have after a really big win and you're about to go against the way you should be. And the next is a trap game, right? And the next
Yeah.
game is the best team in the conference. And you're like, okay, guys, we haven't arrived. We've not proven anything yet.
Yeah.
We've got to face, the big dogs. And I'm obviously not naming teams intentionally.
Yes.
My pride
Yes.
is still there, for
Yes.
sure. But, well, let's keep this train moving here, Sean. You've been part of the game for a while. All of us have, and I love the perspective that maybe you can give us, because you've got a perspective of you played the game right in the Dallas Metroplex area, a huge place for soccer. Your kids have grown up in that area, played at a high level. You're around the game at extremely high level. Coaches that have coached at the highest level. Players. So you've seen the game at all different angles, even from a business perspective. You see the business side of the game as well. Give us a little insight on, what you like about where we are as a country with the game, and what are some areas you think that we could be doing better?
That's like a loaded question.
Very much
Uh,
loaded, Sean. Be careful. No, I'm kidding. I'm
yes.
kidding. There's no wrong
Hey,
answer. This is totally your
yeah,
opinion.
yeah,
Your
you
opinion.
know, it's a tough one. I'm in the world of youth soccer. Um, and some would call it alphabet soup. There's just so many levels, so many leagues, and there's so many entities. And, and without even mentioning any of them, you could just start rattling off 5 or 6 different, and then, locally 5 or 6 more, right? I just think there's so many layers, and it reverts me back to the conversation when we started. There used to be one team and one age group and one club. And now it's such a financial um, kingdom, right? For these clubs. There's a lot of money running through these clubs to have 10 teams that are in the '09 age group or whatever it may be, you know? And I think it starts to get watered down. I mean, I think there's a competition level for everyone. I really honestly do that because I think there is an elite level. There is, and then, just if you call it, 1, 2, and 3, there's a level 1, there's level 2, level 3, whatever. And there's levels for everybody. And with those leagues, I think there's levels for everybody. Um, the state of our game, man, if you just look at the recent, results from our men's team, I think it's dismal at best. They say that, we needed all our players needed to go play in Europe, right? So now all the men are playing in Europe, and then we had an American coach or we had a European coach, and they're like, well, that coach is not very good. And so they get another really good coach and they're still not playing to their best of their ability. And it's like, and then I actually heard Alexi Lawless say the other day, does the American team just need an American coach that just understands the American player? I don't, again, it's what is it? I don't know what drives these players. And I think it's very hard for a European coach to come in. I mean, look at the size of America compared to Europe. The landscape is huge. Um, and the women, other than last night losing to Brazil, but the average age of that group that started that game was 22 years old. And that's unheard of on the women's side, So I do think there's opportunities, but man, the landscape, from a youth side, there's just so many opportunities and options. And I don't know if that's good or bad. Like some people would say having options is good. Um, it's just, man, it's mind boggling to be fair. Because we film all levels of soccer. And, and I don't want to put a label on where they all sit. There's a pyramid for a reason, right? And I don't have to sit here and talk about where the pyramid and where these leagues sit inside that pyramid from a competition level. They all know where in their own right, where they're at. We're just blessed to be able to capture because at some point, those kids that want to, at whatever level, want to go on to play at the next level, they need video. So we're there to provide a service for that. But, the opportunity, and look, from the college game, there are so many opportunities for kids to further their education in soccer at all levels, from D1 to NAIA and JUCO. There are so many opportunities, and it's way different, Phil, from when you and I, and even Paul were growing up. The opportunities are far more greater than they are back then. So from that aspect, I think it's great for kids to get an education, play the game that they love. And, maybe if they're at a super high level, they play pro for a few years. Like even having the women's pro league now with the opportunity and super league, having two pro leagues in the US, I think that's great. The opportunities are there. But I still think they're figuring that out. Like, I still think that's a whole different landscape that hasn't figured itself out. So we're in this great opportunity, right? The game is in our country and it's grown so much. I think in 94, catapult, 99, women, catapult, 26, catapult. Now we get to 2031, catapult again. It's just a springboard for the success of the game in our country. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I do think that there's some type of spaghetti. Like someone just threw spaghetti against a wall because there's really no strategy or plan. Everything is just blossomed out at their own pace. And I would call it a spaghetti chart because there's no rhyme or reason and there's no real formality to the youth landscape in our country. And then you got to think about U.S. Soccer is trying to develop these youth national team players and identify them. How many kids slip through the cracks, and or somebody knows somebody and that kid's getting a look, and that's part of but that's also part of college recruiting. I mean,
Mhm.
that some of those kids are getting looked over just because of sheer volume. I mean, Paul's been on the recruiting side at showcases, and I mean, there's diamonds in the rough. Now with RL, like finding a kid in RL that really could be an NL player, or even going to a GA showcase or DPL or USYS. There's diamonds everywhere, and maybe they play at that level just because they don't want to play, or they don't want to deal with all the stuff that happens at, the ultra competitive team. They just want to play with their friends, but they're really good, you know? So I kind of went around in circles and circles, or like a merry-go-round, but I think
No, but
that,
you're right about that.
that's indicative of the state of where we're
Mhm.
at in the soccer. It is a merry-go-round.
Yep.
It's-
It's the sheer size is evident. And you mentioned what you just mentioned. I had a conversation Sunday actually with a dad whose daughter plays in the Metroplex, but lives 2 hours from the Metroplex. And she's a very good player. But they can't commit 3 days a week driving to the Metroplex. So she plays on an RL team, but she probably has the ability to play on the top team. But again, somebody's going to get a great find. If they're willing to put in the time. But yeah, the sheer size. But yeah, that could be a rabbit trail we go down. But I love the question. I love your answers. I mean, I think it shows there really is not and we've asked that question a lot of times on the show. There's not a right or wrong answer. Like I said at the beginning, it's just opinion. And most people do what you did. They start thinking, their mind starts to go, it's like, okay, well, there's this and there's that. And we're just so massive, as a country. But I do remember the days I grew up in Georgia, you play in Georgia, you win your state, you go to regional, then you go to national. I mean, it was U.S. youth soccer, and that was it. Those were all the letters, USYS, that was it,
Yep. No,
and it's changed. And again, I don't know if it's good or bad. It's just different. But I do think, as a soccer culture, we have to continue to grind and try to continue to figure it out. And I do think you're spot on about the blips, as you call them, those every couple of years when we're hosting World Cups, right? In the US, it drives interest, which drives more people to the game, which is a good and bad thing, right? It's like, oh, now all the kids want to play, I want to be, it makes it bigger. But again, and I think as soccer community, we continue to drive those conversations and, keep trying to figure it out. Right. But again, not losing the focus of coming down to, I said this when I did some consulting work, I would say this a lot. We're really trying to cater to the top 1 or 2% of the players. We can't forget about the 98 and 99% who'll never play at an elite level. And we've had folks on here that it's about the love of the game, the kids who want to play, and it can be a lifestyle sport, right? You can play as an adult. I can't. I'm broken now, but you can play as an adult for the most part, but a lot of people don't play anymore because they lost the love, because that drive for that to be in that top 1 or 2% drove them away from the game. And that could be as early as, what's the dropout rate, really, really starts to flow at 14, 15 years old. That's ridiculous. So I think that balance too has to come into play of, hey, this is sport, this is youth sport, this is recreation. Let's love the game. Let's create fans of the game, right? And that'll help grow our national teams and our pro teams, because we need fans to buy hot dogs and tickets.
right.
And videos.
That's right.
And videos.
Yeah, definitely. I always said, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I always said that burnout is unmet expectations at home.
I would agree with that. A lot of times very much could be.
Like, it's just, they talk about, kids stopping playing, not only soccer, but, 14, that's kind of like becoming a freshman.
Yeah.
And there's a grind, and then there's all these things like with soccer. Like, I know what we did with our kids. We played futsal. We did the extra skills. We did foot skills. We did shooting and finishing. But my kids also ran, track in middle school and stuff, because it was fun. They played basketball, and they were really good at defense, but man, they couldn't shoot because their footwork was there. So we did play other sports, but then you centralize and you focus once you get into high school. And it was a little different for one because of DA versus the requirement of not being able to play high school versus the other who played at Prospero, who actually won a state championship last year in 6A, which makes a great run, and so it's, I don't let, and I've always told my kids, don't let your soccer successes define who you are. You're defined by your faith and who you are inside and who you're comfortable being. And, soccer can help shape you in so many ways because it's so fun and you have lots of relationships and friendships and lifelong ones and memories. I mean, the memories and experiences, of taking, my oldest daughter to Gothenburg and playing Gothia Cup and playing Dana Cup, or, my little, going to state, or, there's so many memories that the game can give you. And man, I just remember, in some of those, even losing games, but the memories of losing those games, that it doesn't define who you are. Um, but it makes the successes just so much a little bit better, and some of the opportunities. And, um, it's crazy. And then, my son playing in Dallas Cup and like just having that prestige of playing in Dallas Cup when Dallas Cup is, to me, is one of the most prestigious, tournaments in the world. And my youngest daughter, when they had a girl, she three-peated. She won Dallas Cup 3 years in a row. My wife lost in the final of Dallas Cup. So we're as a family bringing the medals out and showing them like mom actually could play too, so it's really cool.
Yeah, that's funny you say that. I literally had a conversation with my daughter yesterday. We have 5, and I have 2 in the house still, and my junior in high school. And she proud dad moment. She just made first team all league, which is an incredible league,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
great.
junior, and so that was really cool. But I said, did you know your mom was the county player of the year in Alameda County, and it was the year that Jason Kidd was the athlete of the year in that same county. And she didn't know who Jason Kidd was, of course, so I had to describe who that was. Um, but uh, but she goes, "No, I never knew that." My kids like have no idea that how good their mom was. And I love that because my wife would never share that. Like she's like, "No, I
Sure.
wasn't any good. I was not whatever." But it reminded me of one of the things you were talking about is identification and the alphabet soup we have now and how hard that is. But if and it was not who what you know, but who you know and all that stuff, which is just true. It just is. And it was true back when we were kids too. ODP was the way for identification, and ODP was broken, right? I mean, it was who you knew, and there was politics and all that. There's always going to be politics, but I think now it's just there's so many different ways, and how do you even navigate? I mean, I remember a conversation with you, Paul, when you're GA, and I was like, "What is GA even?" And you're like, "I don't know. That's Chuck's job this week to go figure that out." And it was
Totally.
like, and that was the reality of it. That was back when we had less. But to your point, we had one team in the Saddleback Valley of South Orange County, when now there's probably 25 or 30 teams in that same
Mhm.
area that have 3 or 4 deep at each level. And so it's a totally different world. That being said, at some level, we know that those kids who really want to play, those kids who love it and are good enough, there is a path for them. And that's what's cool. And I look at it and it's not a negative at all. It's actually a great opportunity to go to JC and play. Like what an incredible way, to do that. And we've had girls on our high school team who never saw the field in high school who went and ended up starting the next year at a JC, and it was great for them. And then, one of them went on to play at a Division II school after that, which was incredible, right? And other girls are like, "Nope, I'm done," for all kinds of different reasons. And that's okay. But as we wrap up, we have a couple questions we ask everybody, and these conversations always go so fast. We could go on for hours with you, no doubt. This is great. But how have you used the lessons you've learned directly from the game? We talked about how you use them in the business, and obviously in those lessons. But how have you used them in your marriage and parenting? And you've alluded to some things, but how have you used these lessons? And one of the things like Paul and I talked, Paul would say, stick in. That's one thing that Marcy would say. Mine is retaliator gets the red. As a parent, you usually catch the one who retaliates, right? And but what's some lessons you learned directly from the game that you use in your marriage and your parenting?
Um, eyes to see, ears to hear. I tried to hear lately. um, I try to. I don't always have to speak, and being able to listen. And I never really utilized that in the game. Like I was always quick to want to have the first word, or always finish the sentence, or um. So I think here lately, just in the past few years with parenting and having kids in college and and in marriage, and really being a faith-based marriage, really utilizing the ability to listen, because a lot of the times your kids just want to talk through it. They're not looking for a solution. They just want to tell you what's going on, and in that conversation, um, they find out what they're wanting themselves. And we've seen that a lot. Um, I also see a lot of lead by example, because they do see what you're doing. They do hear what you're doing. They hear what you say. And as a parent, you're so impactful, not only to your wife, but to your children, in so many ways. And if you can lead by example, um, that truly is, you don't even have to say anything. Just your actions can be so impactful for your children and for your wife. Um, I think those are two things that really have helped me in my marriage and parenting.
Love it. Love it. All right. So speed round questions. So we won't dive deep in it, but that's amazing. I love that. Last question as we kind of wrap up. What have you watched, read, or listened to lately that has most impacted your thinking on how soccer explains life and leadership? Can be books, can be podcasts, can be movies, can be anything.
I mean, my wife and I are watching Chosen, because
Oh, that's good.
it's really good. And like, this is not the first time we've watched it. We're also watching House of David.
I was about to say, if you watch that, you got to watch House of David.
We're watching House of David, and Goliath just went down. So
Oh, don't.
waiting.
That's
Oh,
spoiler
oh my
alert.
gosh,
people.
spoiler
alert.
You gotta.
That was last week.
That was
Last week. I mean, where you been? That was last week.
Nobody
Come
knew
down
that's what was
Thursday.
gonna happen.
Yeah,
My
but
kids are
what
like,
you-
Dad, don't
I mean,
tell
have
me
you-
the
have you-
ending, you know?
Have you not read the Bible? Those are two that we're currently watching. Yeah, those are the two. And then Mark Driscoll out of Scottsdale, How to Be a Man, is a book that I'm currently in.
Love it. Love it.
Well, thanks, Sean, for being a part of this conversation, and thanks for taking the time. I'm super encouraged by your story, by just your faith journey, how it's impacted everything, but also just how you're contributing to the game. I love even just hearing how your experience as a kid has made its way into how you're doing business today, and really wanting to get people to have a shot, to have a chance, and I love that. So thanks for being a part of just the soccer community, and for sharing with us today.
Well, definitely. Thank you both, Phil, Paul, just for reaching out and giving me the opportunity to either, one, tell our story, but also take a deep dive, right? If just anybody can get just a little nugget here and there of, through vulnerability, or just through true honesty, or my story, and how I do life, and how continue to strive to be better, as a human, and in faith, and a leader in business. That's a bonus, right? We've done something here special. So just thank you for the opportunity to share the story and get to talk to two guys candidly. Would love to do it often.
Love it.
Well, folks, thank you for being a part of this conversation. I do hope what Sean just said. I hope that you are taking something from this. We always hope that. That's why we do what we do. So you guys can learn, you guys can, everyone out there can really understand more about how this game can impact your life in ways that are well outside the game. As we always say in our coaching, it's about more than the game. It's about more than the game. It's got to be, or else we could be doing a lot more productive things. And so, folks, if you want to learn more about Warrior Way and what Paul and Marcy are doing down there in Waco, check out warriorwaysoccer.com. If you want to learn more about what we're doing with Providence World, coaching the bigger game, you can check that out in the show notes as well. If you want to do any disc training or anything like that with me, you can check that out in the show notes. But as always, we hope that you're taking what you're learning from this show and you're using it to be a better coach, a better spouse, a better parent, a better leader, better in everything that you do. And you continually remind yourself that soccer does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.